I remember the day it all went south. I was on the bus, heading into downtown Chicago for a job interview. Traffic was already a nightmare, but this was different. People were screaming. Not just annoyed, but raw, primal screams. Then I saw it. A man, he looked like he was having a seizure, thrashing on the sidewalk. But then he bit someone. Just bit them. And that person, in seconds, started acting just like him. It was a feeding frenzy, pure chaos. My bus driver slammed on the brakes, and the doors burst open. Everyone just bolted. I stayed put, frozen for a second, watching this nightmare unfold. The man who had been bitten lunged at another pedestrian, his eyes vacant, his jaw working like a predator's. Then more people were joining in. It wasn't just one or two. It was spreading like a plague, this hunger. I saw a woman, her face contorted in agony, being torn apart by a crowd of what looked like her neighbors. Their skin was gray, their movements jerky and unnatural, and the sounds they made, guttural, animalistic. It was a scene ripped straight from a bad movie, except the blood was real, the screams were real, and the absolute terror was suffocating. I finally jolted myself out of it. The bus driver was screaming at us to get out, to run. I scrambled out with the rest, but it was like stepping into a meat grinder. The sheer number of them, shuffling, lurching, with that insane, vacant hunger in their eyes, it was overwhelming. I didn't know where to go. My interview was forgotten. My life, everything I knew, was dissolving into this horrifying, flesh-eating reality. I saw a couple, they were trying to pull their child away from a man who had obviously turned. The mother was screaming, the father was pushing them both behind him, but there were too many. You could see the desperation in his eyes, the fight he knew he couldn't win. It's the kind of thing that burrows into your brain and stays there, replaying itself over and over. The sheer helplessness, the utter lack of control. I managed to duck into an alleyway, heart pounding like a drum solo. The stench of decay was already starting to fill the air. I could hear the shuffling feet, the groans, getting closer. What would you do? If you were me, cornered in a stinking alley, with the world ending outside? I just pressed myself against the cold brick, trying to disappear, trying to make myself small. Every rustle, every distant cry, sent a fresh wave of icy dread through me. This isn't just about being bitten, it's about seeing humanity, what we think of as humanity, reduced to this savage, primal drive. It changes you, seeing that. It makes you question everything, everyone. If you're hearing this, if this recording somehow gets out, please, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like. Maybe, just maybe, someone will know what happened here. I don't know how much longer I can last. The gnawing hunger in my own stomach is a constant, unwelcome companion. The last of the canned goods were gone. I'd rationed them down to the last can of beans, but even that was just a memory now. The gnawing in my gut wasn't just hunger anymore, it was a deep, primal ache that vibrated through my bones. I tried everything to ignore it, to reason with it, but it was like arguing with a tidal wave. The recording was finished. I'd said all I could, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, would hear it. Outside, the world was a muted symphony of groans and shuffling feet. It had been days since I'd last seen a functioning vehicle, days since the last coherent human utterance I'd heard that wasn't a desperate plea or a guttural shriek. My little apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. I'd barricaded the door with furniture, a futile gesture I knew. They wouldn't need a door if they wanted in. I crept to the window, peering through a small gap in the makeshift blinds. A figure shambled past, its gait jerky, its eyes vacant, fixed on some unseen point. It was the familiar sight, the terrifying new normal. Then, another figure joined it, and another. A small group, moving with that same unnatural slowness. They weren't actively hunting, not yet, but their presence was a constant, suffocating threat. The hunger intensified. My own reflection stared back from the darkened windowpane. My skin was pale, my eyes sunken. I could feel the shift within me, the subtle erosion of thought, the creeping tendrils of that same primal drive. I fought it, clinging to memories, to the faces of people I loved, to the sheer, stubborn refusal to become one of them. But it was a losing battle. The hunger was winning. A sound from the hallway. A soft, scraping noise. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, listening. It was closer. Too close. I could hear the heavy, uneven breathing now. The barricade. It groaned, a long, drawn-out protest of stressed wood and metal. I knew it wouldn't hold. Panic flared, hot and sharp. There was nowhere to go, no one to call. The recording. That was all I had left. I fumbled for the device, my hands shaking. I had to do something. Anything. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then, a single, heavy thud against the door, followed by another. And another. The barricade was giving way. I looked at the recording device, then out the window at the encroaching twilight. The hunger was a roaring inferno now, and a different kind of thought, a dark, desperate one, began to surface. What if surrender was the only way to survive? The thought was terrifying, alien, yet, strangely, comforting. The door splintered. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then, a single, heavy thud against the door, followed by another. And another. The barricade was giving way. I looked at the recording device, then out the window at the encroaching twilight. The hunger was a roaring inferno now, and a different kind of thought, a dark, desperate one, began to surface. What if surrender was the only way to survive? The thought was terrifying, alien, yet, strangely, comforting. The door splintered. I gripped the old shotgun, the metal cold and slick with sweat against my palm. It wasn't the same shotgun my dad used for hunting. This was a relic, found in a deserted sporting goods store, its barrel scratched and pitted, but it was all I had. Outside, the sky was bleeding orange and purple, a beautiful, terrible backdrop to the end of everything I'd ever known. My name is Alex, and I was in what used to be Denver, holed up in a small apartment on the 5th floor. The first few days had been pure chaos. I remember seeing it on the news, a strange virus, people acting erratically. Then, it wasn't on the news anymore. It was on the streets. I saw Mrs. Henderson from across the hall, the sweet old lady who always offered me cookies, hunched over a man on the sidewalk, her face contorted, tearing into him with a primal savagery that made my stomach churn. Her eyes were vacant, milky white, and the sounds were just guttural snarls and wet, tearing noises. I slammed my shutters shut, my own breath coming in ragged gasps, trying to block out the nightmare unfolding below. The initial panic gave way to a gnawing dread, then a hollow emptiness. Food became the immediate problem. The convenience store down the block was picked clean within hours. I learned to scavenge, to be silent, to move like a ghost. Every shadow was a threat, every creak of a floorboard a potential death sentence. Trust. That concept evaporated faster than water in the desert. I'd seen people turn on each other for a can of beans. A woman I'd tried to help, thinking for a fleeting moment that humanity still meant something, actually tried to bite me when I reached for a water bottle we both spotted. Her teeth were sharp, yellowed, and her scream of frustration was more animal than human. I had to leave her there. The guilt still pricks at me sometimes, a dull ache in the back of my mind. The constant fear wears you down. It's not just the creatures outside, it's the gnawing uncertainty. Are you truly alone? Is that rustling in the alley just the wind, or something far, far worse? My own body felt like a traitor. The constant hunger, the thirst, the sheer exhaustion were overwhelming. I caught myself talking to the empty air, just to hear another voice, even if it was my own. The silence of the city was deafening, punctuated only by the distant moans that were becoming the new soundtrack of my existence. And now, this door. It was old, solid oak, but the constant assault was taking its toll. The wood groaned in protest with each impact. I braced myself, my knuckles white on the shotgun's grip. The splintering intensified. The door finally gave way with a violent crack, showering splinters into the small room. I didn't hesitate. Bursting through the opening, shotgun raised, I scanned the dim interior. It was a cramped kitchen, barely lit by the weak moonlight filtering through a grimy window. An overturned table lay in the center, and scattered debris suggested a hurried departure, or perhaps a violent struggle. My heart hammered against my ribs. The moans had stopped, replaced by a guttural snuffling sound coming from the corner, near what looked like a closed pantry. Every instinct screamed danger, but the thought of whatever was making that noise gnawing at my sanity pushed me forward. I crept across the floor, the floorboards creaking under my weight, each sound amplified in the oppressive quiet. As I reached the pantry door, the snuffling grew louder, more frantic. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was too ragged, too human. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, cold metal against my clammy skin. Taking a deep breath, I twisted it open. The sight that greeted me was worse than I could have imagined. Curled in the corner of the small pantry, amidst the scattered sacks of grain and tins, was a figure. It was human, or at least it had been. Gaunt and emaciated, its skin hung loosely on its bones, a sickly grayish hue. Its eyes, sunken and vacant, stared out with an unnerving intensity, but they saw nothing. Its mouth was open, a silent scream frozen on its face, emitting that awful, wet snuffling sound. But it wasn't dead. Its chest rose and fell with shallow, labored breaths. As I watched, it tried to lift a hand, a skeletal claw reaching out weakly, only to fall back to the floor. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was what the moans were. This was what the city had become. Not just death, but a grotesque, lingering parody of life. I lowered the shotgun, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. What was I even doing here? There was no one to save. No hope. Just more of this emptiness. I backed away from the pantry, the image of those vacant eyes burned into my mind. The silence outside felt different now, heavier. It was the silence of a world that had already ended, and I was just another ghost wandering its ruins. I turned and walked back out the way I came, the broken door a gaping maw behind me, leading me back into the empty streets. Honestly, I'm not even sure why I remember that specific Tuesday. It started like any other day, you know. I was at the downtown market, grabbing some produce for dinner, when all hell broke loose. It wasn't a slow burn, it was like a switch flipped. 1 minute, people are haggling over tomatoes, the next, Mrs. Henderson from the bakery is lunging at poor Mr. Davies, trying to bite his arm off. It was chaos. Absolute, unadulterated chaos. I saw it happen, right there, in front of me. Davies, this old guy who always had a smile, he just went down, and then, he was up again, but not Davies. His eyes were milky, and he was making this guttural sound, like an animal. Then it spread. Like a contagion, but worse. It wasn't just the biting, it was the sheer savagery. People I'd known my whole life, neighbors, friends, they were just gone. Replaced by these things. They were still recognizably human, but twisted. Limbs at odd angles, skin mottled and torn, a hunger in their eyes that was utterly primal. I remember seeing a kid, no older than 8, his face smeared with blood, gnawing on something I desperately didn't want to identify. The screams never really stopped that first day. They were replaced by that awful moaning, that shuffling sound that became the soundtrack to my new reality. I managed to duck into an alleyway, heart pounding like a drum solo. The smell hit me then, metallic, coppery, the unmistakable stench of death. And it wasn't just one death. It was a symphony of it. I peered out from behind an overflowing dumpster and saw a horde of them, a shuffling, groaning tide, moving with a terrifying, relentless purpose. They weren't thinking, they were just driven. driven by this insatiable need to consume. It was primal, and it was terrifyingly effective. The initial shock was paralyzing. I just stood there, frozen, watching the world I knew crumble. My brain just couldn't process it. But then, the instinct kicked in. The survival instinct. I had to move. I had to find shelter. But where? Every street was a death trap. Every building a potential tomb. The trust I'd always placed in people, in society, evaporated in an instant. Who could you trust when your neighbor could become a monster overnight? The sheer weight of that realization was crushing. I was utterly alone, and the very concept of safety felt like a cruel joke. My mind was a battlefield, oscillating between sheer terror and a desperate, almost manic need to keep breathing. I ran, not really knowing where I was going, just away from the horror, the moaning, the gnawing. The city was a maze of overturned cars and scattered debris. Each shadow seemed to stretch and writhe, morphing into the shapes that haunted my thoughts. Every distant sound, a scrape, a rustle, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I kept my pace steady, trying to push down the rising panic that threatened to consume me. My senses were on high alert, straining to identify threats, but the constant, low thrum of the city's dying moments was a symphony of dread. It wasn't just the visual chaos, it was the pervasive smell, a sickly sweet coppery odor that clung to everything. I found myself ducking into a darkened alleyway, pressing myself against the cold brick wall. The silence here was almost worse than the noise outside. It was a pregnant silence, filled with anticipation. My breath hitched in my throat. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive stillness. I closed my eyes for a second, trying to regain some semblance of control. When I opened them again, my gaze fell on something near the dumpster. It was a child's teddy bear, its stuffing spilling out, one button eye staring blankly. A wave of nausea washed over me. I pictured a child, playing with that bear, only to, no. I couldn't go there. I forced myself to look away, but the image was seared into my mind. Then, a faint sound. A wet, guttural sound from deeper within the alley. It wasn't a moan, not like the ones I'd heard earlier. This was different. It was low, almost a whisper, but laced with a chilling hunger. I held my breath, straining to hear. Was it close? Too close. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I could feel a cold sweat prickling my skin. My eyes darted around, searching for an escape, a way out, but the alley seemed to have no end. The shadows deepened, coalescing into indistinguishable forms. The sound came again, closer this time, and I realized with a sickening lurch that it was accompanied by a faint, dragging noise. Something was moving towards me, slow and deliberate. It wasn't running, not like I was. It was, stalking. The psychological terror was building, not just from the fear of being caught, but from the sheer, inhuman nature of the threat. It was the unknown, the perversion of something familiar, that was truly terrifying. My mind conjured images, fragmented and horrific, of what might be lurking just beyond my limited vision, its movements a mockery of life. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence, a palpable aura of malice. The rustling in the undergrowth grew louder, closer. It wasn't the sound of a casual animal moving through the woods, it was deliberate, calculated. Every snap of a twig, every displaced leaf, felt like a taunt. I pressed myself deeper into the dense foliage, trying to become invisible, but the heavy, damp air clung to me, betraying my presence. The scent of pine needles and damp earth was now tinged with something else, something metallic and sharp, making my stomach churn. I risked a quick glance over my shoulder, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Nothing. But the feeling intensified, the prickling sensation on the back of my neck growing unbearable. It was right there, I was sure of it. The silence that followed the sounds was almost worse, pregnant with anticipation. It was waiting for me to make a mistake, to reveal myself. I could feel its patience, a chillingly intelligent patience. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom between the trees. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, not a human gait, not an animalistic lunge. It was something in between, a horrifying blend that defied understanding. It was tall, impossibly so, and gaunt, with limbs that seemed too long, too thin. I couldn't make out any distinct features, just a silhouette against the fading light, a shape that pulsed with an unseen energy. It stopped, tilting its head as if listening, and in that moment, I knew it had found me. The dread was complete, absolute. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the harrowing realities of survival. As we close this chapter, it's crucial to reflect on the courage and resilience displayed by those who faced unimaginable circumstances. Each story, from the quiet desperation of hiding in abandoned structures to the frantic scramble for resources, underscored a fundamental truth: preparation is paramount. The ability to adapt, to think critically under immense pressure, and to possess even basic knowledge of self-sufficiency can mean the difference between life and a grim end. Remember the individual who fashioned a rudimentary water filter from scavenged materials, a seemingly small act that saved them from a debilitating illness. This wasn't about grand heroic gestures, but about the quiet, persistent application of practical skills. In moments of profound crisis, when the world as you know it crumbles, the greatest ally you possess is your own composure. Panic is a contagion, a silent killer that paralyzes action and clouds judgment. The narrative of the lone survivor who managed to navigate a treacherous landscape by meticulously charting their course, rather than succumbing to fear, serves as a potent reminder. They understood that every step, every decision, needed to be deliberate. The instinct to flee blindly or to freeze in terror is powerful, but it is also a weakness that can be overcome with mental fortitude. Cultivating a calm, analytical approach to chaos is not just advisable, it is essential for navigating any overwhelming situation, be it a personal emergency or a widespread catastrophe. A key takeaway from these experiences is the importance of understanding your environment. The survivor who identified edible plants in a seemingly barren region demonstrated this perfectly. This knowledge wasn't just about finding sustenance, it was about understanding the subtle language of nature, recognizing opportunities where others saw only desolation. Beyond immediate needs, consider developing a basic understanding of first aid. Knowing how to treat common injuries or illnesses can be a lifesaver when professional help is unavailable. As we bid farewell, we encourage you to internalize these lessons. The world, though often predictable, can shift in an instant. Being ready is not about living in constant fear, but about empowering yourself to face whatever may come. We hope these narratives have provided valuable insights and perhaps even sparked a new appreciation for the skills that can ensure one's safety and well-being. If you found this exploration insightful, please consider subscribing for more content and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue to share these vital perspectives.